Job was introduced as a righteous man, a wealthy man who lived in the land of Uz. Job was blameless in the sight of God. He was an upright man, a man with no mistakes, like no sin. He follows God's instruction back to back with no error, a man that has God's protection, but ended up losing everything he had in just one day, his wealth, his children, his health in a single day. This chapter sets up one of the greatest tests of faith in the entire Bible. Stay with me as we go into the details of what really happened to Mr. Job. Welcome back to Inspired by Nessa. To all returning subscribers and new subscribers, I welcome you all. Today, we are talking about Mr. Job, the blameless man, a man of complete honesty, uprightness, virtue, nobility, honor, name it. Mr. Job has it. He has the fear of God, and because of that, he stayed away from evil, and God blessed him with 7 sons and 3 daughters. And not just that alone. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. Because Mr. Job was rich, he employed many staff members. He was the only richest person in his community, and was humble that he helped so many people. You can imagine being the richest and still staying humble to God, and not just God alone, but to people who live in his community, home, and far away. Mr. Job had 7 sons, and there's a particular feast that goes on in the family of Job, and the 7 sons of Job take turns preparing the feast in their various homes, and they will also invite their 3 sisters to join them in celebration. But the meaning of this particular feast that they take turns was not stated what it was meant for, because after the celebration ends, sometimes Mr. Job will then purify his children. He would get up early in the morning to offer a burnt offering to God for each and every one of them. You can imagine how many animals will be sacrificed for a man who has 7 sons and 3 daughters, because animals are what they use in purifying themselves. In the book of Leviticus, God gave specific instructions about animals being used as sacrifices for purification. Instead of them being charged by their sins, the animals will be the ones to bear their consequences, which we've covered in one of our previous videos. And that's what Mr. Job was trying to do for his children. This man knows God's rules like his hand. Now you can imagine the number of animals he will use because he did it per child, but Mr. Job didn't feel it because he had them in his care, and I'm sure he went with the best. So Job will then say this when he is about to do it. He will say, "Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts." This was how Mr. Job continued to do this practice each time they performed the feast. Now, this is where the test started from. You can imagine how merciful God is, that he allowed Lucifer, also known Satan, to be in his court for meetings when the members of the heavenly court present themselves before God. This particular one is the one that gets me talking each time the story of Mr. Job comes to my head, because I will be like, why will God still allow him to enter his court? Like, why? For God's sake, this is someone who wanted to take away your kingdom and also take your place, despite all the special tones he uses to create the Lucifer and everything given to him. Not just that, but also take your children from you. And in my head, I will like, God can never be man because, And the funniest thing is that God still didn't take the power he gave Lucifer. God didn't take them back. This God, let me just stop there. So God looked straight at Lucifer and said, "Where have you come from?" The Lord asked Satan. And Satan said he has been trolling up and down, watching everything going on earth. Mr. Job was on his own. Oh, Mr. Job, I pity him here because he didn't do anything wrong. It was God who brought the attention of Lucifer to Mr. Job. God said to Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job?" God was the one who drew the attention of Lucifer to Job. God said to Lucifer that Job was upright, blameless, and the finest man in all the earth, which means God finds him upright like he had no sins. There was something Lucifer said there that changed my thinking faculty. Lucifer said, "Yes, but you have made him prosper." Listen to what I'm about to say here. Lucifer said, Mr. Job has every reason to fear God because God has always put a wall of protection around him, his home, and his property. Did you hear that? That's a prayer point for you to pray. It shows that when God's protection is on you, there's nothing your enemy can do to pull you down. Lucifer was scared to go close to Mr. Job. He had to convince God to take away his protection from Mr. Job so he could penetrate even when God knew what he would say. See, these particular area tells us that when God takes off his shield and protection from our lives, we are cooked. And I came to think of something again because this Mr. Job story truly opened my eyes to many things. What if these trials and problems we are facing are because God has removed his wall of protection from our lives? Have you ever asked yourself this question? See, the enemy will not just attack if they don't have something to hold against you, because Mr. Job had nothing to be held for. Lucifer then told God to allow him take away what he had. I want you to start praying these prayer points from today. Every morning, every day, keep praying this prayer that God, do not take away your hand of favor, mercy, and wall of protection from my life, because if you do, the enemy will finish me. Prayer number 2. God, what I will do that will make you take away your wall of protection from my life, my business, and home, please, God, do not let me do it. Please don't joke with this, because so many of us have done, or let me say, are doing things that we are not supposed to do in God's sight. Back to Mr. Job. Job didn't know that there was a meeting in heaven. I don't know if Lucifer think he's still one of the angels that made him follow the other angels to the meeting. So afterwards, God gave him permission to go ahead and do what he wanted. But even at that, God still gave Lucifer limit over Job's life. He said to Lucifer, do whatever you want to do, but spare his life. Do not touch his life. God allows Satan to test Mr. Job, to take his possession, but not his life. And Satan left God's presence to accomplish his plans and desired to harm Job. On a faithful day, Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house. That's how in one day 4 messengers came. The first one arrived at Mr. Job's house and said, your oxen were plowing with the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabaeans raided them. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. That he was the only one who survived and escaped to tell him. Mr. Job had not digested it. Another one came in. Mr. Job was still listening to the first messenger when the second one arrived. This one added God in his own and said, fire of God has fallen from heaven, and it burned your sheep and killed your servants, including the shepherds, that he's the only one that survived and escaped to tell him. This second messenger had not finished talking. That's how the third messenger walked in and said, raiders took your camels and killed your servants, that he was the only one that escaped to tell him. I'm sure when they were saying this to Mr. Job, he would be looking at them with one bombastic side eye, like, what are they saying? What's going on? Before you know it, the fourth messenger walked in and said, a wind struck the house where your children were eating. All 10 died. I pity Mr. Job here. This is where my Mr. Job got up and tore his clothes. He screamed. Job lost everything in one day. The pain was too much for him to bear. You can imagine losing all you have in one day. Mr. Job didn't say a negative word to God. That was what amazed me the most. Instead, he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship God. Who will do that these days? I don't think any of us can do that these days. Who would think of shaving their head after such a tragic incident? If it happened to any rich person in this generation, the person would just have a stroke or die ASAP. Mr. Job tried honestly to handle it this way. When he fell to the ground, he said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. Here I don't know what Mr. Job was thinking for him to say he came naked and he will go naked. I guess he was frustrated and didn't want to say anything bad. I don't know if I'm the only one thinking this. That's the end of chapter 1. Now in chapter 2, the angels went for another meeting again in God's court, and Lucifer went again with them. Now this time, Lucifer wasn't pleased with the reaction he saw from Mr. Job, so he then asked for another thing. But before Lucifer spoke a word, God asked Satan again, where have you come from? Satan replied God, saying, I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that is going on. Even the devil is watching us. See, we need to be prayerful. The devil doesn't rest. You can imagine him saying he has been patrolling the earth. Who knows? Maybe he had come to meet you at the point where you are about to succeed in life, and he turned everything upside down just to get you give up or tired. This is why I said we need to be prayerful that whenever the devil is patrolling up and down, he shouldn't see us. In verse 3 of this chapter, God then asked Satan this question again, whether he noticed Job as his upright and blameless. With integrity, God then said to Satan again that did he see how Job maintained his steez? Don't mind me, God was telling Satan that Mr. Job maintained his integrity despite what Satan had done to him. God then said something that got me thinking. God said this, even though you urged me to harm him without cause. This one is very loud. I thought of it. What if that's how Lucifer urges God each time to harm you and I, just to test our faith and integrity, just like Mr. Job? And when we face these trials and problems, who always wins the match? Do we let God win or the devil? Most of us only know God when things are good, and when things goes wire, or let me say bad, we tend to give up. And the devil wins. What if God is just testing how firm we can stand with him, both in good times and bad times? God will strengthen us all. Now, Satan's reply to what God said was, skin for skin. A man will give up what he has to save his life. But reach out to him and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face. See, the devil doesn't rest until he takes everything you have. Look at him. Even after God allows him to test Mr. Job at first, is not as if God was happy about the idea, but because God trusted Job to be the same man he knew, and Mr. Job proved God right during the first test. In that first test, Mr. Job teaches us that you can lose everything and still worship God. Your faith is proven when everything falls apart, not when life is good. Job did not understand why, but he trusted God anyway. And God defended him again in front of Satan, which got Satan angry and made him want to take everything from Job, including his life. I want you to check yourself. Ask yourself this. When the enemy presents your file, your case to God, will God defend you just like he did with Mr. Job? Let's continue. God now replied to Satan to go ahead and do as he pleases with Mr. Job, but spare his life. God, please, I beg you, do not let the devil do as he pleases in my life, because I do not have the patience Mr. Job has. That's a prayer point for us all, because Mr. Job suffered and endured a lot, and not all of us have the kind of patience he has. So Satan got back to Job and struck him with painful sores from feet to head. Job sat in ashes, scraping himself with broken pottery. He went from a wealthy, respected man to sitting in ashes, covered with boils that bring out pus. Mr. Job was unrecognizable. If is someone from our generation will just commit suicide or goes mad, people will start saying a lot of bad and good things about the person. But in Mr. Job's case, he had some crazy friends that want to make him mad by all means. See, mind the kind of circle you keep. There is a saying my grandma used to tell us. She would say, when there's money, friends will come, but when there's no money, friends won't come. This was the case of Mr. Job. Mind the kind of circle you keep. Mr. Job's wife couldn't recognize him. That's how terrible the sickness was. And Mr. Job's wife then asked him if he was still trying to keep his integrity. She then told Job to curse God and die. Here, I don't think it was the wife talking, because if you remember, Satan said the same statement in the presence of God. I sense the devil speaking through her, but I love the response Job gave her. He said, "You talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad?" What an insult to Satan. So in all of these, Mr. Job didn't say anything wrong. Now the friends of Job heard what happened to Mr. Job. They all got to each other and traveled from their homes to comfort him and to console him. When they saw Job from a distance, they couldn't recognize him. They wept, tore their robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads. They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights in silence, because they saw that his suffering was too big for words. Sometimes the people close to you give the worst advice in your hardest moments. You can imagine Job's wife. This is someone who was supposed to comfort him, be with him, and console him, but instead, Job's wife told him to curse God. When you're suffering, going through a hard time, or going through challenges, not everyone's opinion is helpful. Also, sometimes the best thing you can do for someone in pain is just be there, just like Job's friends did, but some fake friends will just come to see what's really wrong with you and laugh at you behind. They will even gossip about you. But Job's friends sat in silence for 7 days. That is real friendship. In chapter 3, Job breaks his silence, and what he says is raw and heartbreaking. After I praise Mr. Job in chapters 1 and 2, in chapter 3, Mr. Job started saying things I don't understand. He started cursing the day he was born. In my head, I'm like, is that the next thing to do? Well, I wouldn't blame him. If you have ever been in pain so deep you wished you were never born, after 7 days of silence, Job finally speaks. I was expecting him to continue in worshiping and praising God, even a word of prayer, but Mr. Job never did any of that. Instead, what came from his mouth was grief, pain. It is raw grief. It is honest pain. It is the cry of a man who wishes he had never been born. Job breaks the silence and pours out his anguish. He said, "May the day I was born perish. May the night that said a boy is born be erased. May that day be darkness. May God not care about it. May no light shine on it." Job wished he had died at birth or been stillborn. Nobody is perfect. The flesh will always want you to say things you are not supposed to say. Even our Lord Jesus Christ faced a lot of trials when they want to nail him on the cross, and the flesh tried to take over him, but he immediately rebuked it when he said, "Father, if it is possible to let this cup pass over me." And immediately he said, "But if it is your will, let your will be done." But Job couldn't bear the pain anymore, so the flesh made him say a lot of things. Job asked, "Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Why is light given to those in misery and life to those who are bitter?" Job longed for death, but death didn't come. He said it would be better to be buried than to live in this pain. He also said what he always feared had happened to him, what he dreaded had happened. He said he has no peace, no joy, no quietness, no rest, only trouble. It is okay to be honest with God about your pain. Job did not fake being happy. He did not put on a religious mask. He told God exactly how he felt. Notice Job cursed his birth, not God. He was honest, but he did not turn away from God. God can handle your raw emotions. He would rather have your honest prayers than your fake smiles. In chapter 4, one of Mr. Job's friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, replied to him. Eliphaz is the first of Job's 3 friends to speak. He has been sitting in silence for 7 days. And he then asked Mr. Job this question: "If someone tries to speak with you, will you be upset? Let me say a word. But who can keep from speaking? You have helped many people. You have strengthened those who are in weak hands. Your words have supported people who were falling, and you encouraged those with shaky knees. But now trouble comes to you, and you are discouraged." He also said to Job that Job is terrified when it touches him. Eliphaz told him to stop and think. He also points at something to Job, saying, "Has the innocent ever perished? When have you heard that the upright was destroyed? Those who plow evil and sow trouble reap it." Eliphaz was saying Mr. Job might have done something wrong to God. He had sinned, and there's nothing he has to say because all these things happening to him show he has done something wrong to God. Eliphaz described a terrifying vision where a spirit spoke to him saying, "Can a mortal be more innocent before God? Can a man be purer than his maker?" Eliphaz then told Job that God didn't trust his own angels and has charged his messengers with foolishness. How much less will he trust people made with clay? Eliphaz used this vision to suggest Job was not as innocent as he thought. But let me tell you something that we don't know. Not all suffering is punishment for sin. Sometimes good people go through terrible things, not because they did something wrong, but because God has a bigger plan they cannot see yet. Be careful about judging people's suffering and assuming they must have done something to deserve it. That is what Job's friends did, and God rebuked them at the end. In chapter 5, Eliphaz continues bashing Mr. Job. He said Job should cry for help if he wants, but will anyone answer? He said, which of the angels will answer Mr. Job? That resentment destroys the fool and jealousy kills the simple. Eliphaz also said he has seen that fools may be successful for a moment, but then comes sudden disaster. Eliphaz went on and said, "Blessed is the man whom God corrects. Do not despise the discipline of the Almighty." I wouldn't blame Eliphaz because he thought Job had done something terrible to God, but he didn't know it was a test. Eliphaz meant well, but his theology was wrong. Job was not being disciplined for sin. He then told Mr. Job to go and present his case to God, and he told him that God does great things too marvelous to understand. He then listed the good things God can do and the ones he has done. He told Job to confess his sins, and God will rescue him and keep him away from evil. Mr. Job was so sure of himself that he didn't do anything. Job said, "If my anguish could be weighed, it would outweigh the sand of the seas. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. Does a wild donkey bray when it has grass? Does an ox bellow when it has fodder?" Job was saying, I am not complaining for no reason. My pain is real. Job was telling him that he knew all these things. Job wanted support, not lectures, but his friends were busy lecturing him on what he already knew. When you are in pain, you need friends who will support you, not the ones who will judge you, not the ones who will condemn you. Job's friends made his suffering worse by accusing him of not even wanting to hear him out. If someone you know is going through a hard season, do not lecture them. Love them. So in chapters 6 and 7, Job continued to defend himself in front of his friends as they keep on bashing him, not knowing he was innocent. He was so sure that he didn't commit any sin, which he was trying to tell his friends. Chapter 8, Job's second friend, Bildad, speaks, and he is even more brutal, more ruthless than Eliphaz, suggesting Job's children died because they sinned. Bildad then said, "How long will Job continue talking like this?" He said, "Job sound like a blustering wind." Again, he said, "Does God twist justice?" He said, "Your children must have sinned against God, so he gave them the punishment for their sins. And if you were pure and upright, God would restore you and your once happy home." Bildad believed in karma, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. He was telling Job that he did a bad thing, which is why bad things are happening to him. But life does not work that way. Life is not fair. And that is okay, because you can't question God. Do not fall into the trap of thinking that if you are good, nothing bad will happen. Jesus warned us that we will have trouble in this world, and we are already seeing the trouble. Did you see how Satan came and took everything Job had and left him? And we never hear him complain to God again because he has done what he wanted. He has pleased himself. May Satan not happen to you and me in Jesus' name. Let me hear you say Amen, because this is a serious prayer. Job responds to Bildad in chapter 9 by acknowledging God's power while expressing his frustration that he cannot argue his case before God. Job said he knew all this was true, but how can a person be declared innocent in the presence of God Almighty? He also said if someone wants to take God to court, would it be possible to answer all his questions and not get blamed? For God is so wise and might, who has ever won him successfully? Who has ever challenged him successfully? Job continued, even if I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead for mercy. If I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. Though I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. Mr. Job still stands his ground that he is innocent. Can you and I defend ourselves like this? Chapter 9 of the book of Job made us understand something, that sometimes you feel powerless before God. And that's actually a sign of spiritual maturity. Recognizing God's sovereignty doesn't mean you understand his ways. Job knew God was powerful and right, but he still didn't understand why this was happening. That tension, the trusting God while not understanding him, is where real faith lives. In chapter 10, Job continues speaking directly to God, pouring out his complaint and asking for answers. Mr. Job was disgusted with his life here. He wanted to complain as much as he could freely, as he now hates his life, and he only wanted God to tell him his offense. And I do hear some people saying Job never questioned God. He actually did. He questioned God big time, even though it came from the flesh. And in chapter 10, verse 3, he said, "What do you gain by oppressing me?" And I felt for him the particular place that touched was when he said, "Why did you reject me? The works of your own hands. Will you now turn me to dust again? Did you not bring me forth like milk and curdle me like cheese? Yet this is what you concealed in your heart." Job was saying this out of pain. Chapter 10 of Job made us understand that Job's honesty with God is both painful and beautiful. He doesn't hold back his feelings, yet he keeps the conversation going with God. That's the key. Keep talking to God even when you're angry, confused, or hurt. Yes, I did the same thing 2 weeks ago. I was going through some difficulty, and I woke from my sleep and walked straight to where I had the image of God, and I started talking with anger. I tell you, everything I said that day that I wanted started manifesting the following day. I didn't fast for it to come. I did not pray. I just talked with God. Sometimes God just wants us to talk to him. The opposite of faith isn't doubt. It's silence. Just keep the conversation alive. And when I mean keep talking to God, I didn't say you should curse or be rude to him. No! Please don't get me wrong. What I'm only saying is that communicating with your Father is not always fire, fire, or die, die. Sometimes you just need to be quiet and talk to him like you are seeing him is something that has worked for me. And the people I shared it with also tried it, and it worked for them. In chapter 11, the third friend of Mr. Job, Zophar, speaks, and his words are more brutal than the rest. He was basically telling Job that he deserves even worse than what he's getting. Is in time of trouble and hard time, you will know and see the true colors of your friends. A friend of mine, we are no longer friends anyway, once said to me when I was down that she doesn't want me to grow more than her. She said she doesn't want me to have more than her. I was shocked, and that was around the time Piggy Vest came out. She was the one who introduced me to it. I asked how much she was saving. She then said, "You can put in any amount." And before I asked her again, I said, even though I want to start this piggy vest, I would start with $2 to see. Before you knew it, she shouted that I shouldn't put such an amount, that I should put like 5 cents. I was like, why will I put such a small amount to gain what at the end of the month? She said even she herself didn't put up to the amount I said. I still didn't understand her until I pushed her, and she said that she doesn't want me to have anything more than her. I ran for my life, and this is someone I've taken as a sister. My family knows her. She is very close to my family and me, and that's why I said earlier to be mindful of the kind of circle you keep. Although some people are lucky with their circle, I'm not always lucky, and that's the same thing happening with Mr. Job. You can imagine his friend Zophar saying he deserves more than what he's facing, someone you don't even know what happened to him or what he did. Zophar's speech represents the worst of religious judgment, assuming he knows God's mind and Job's guilt. Zophar was telling Job that he talks too much. A whole job. This Zophar then said, "Should I remain silent while you babble on?" Zophar accused Job of talking too much and saying nothing of value. Zophar said something brutal here. He said, "You claim your beliefs are pure. You are clean in the sight of God." He also said to him, "Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sins." Can you solve the mysteries of God? Can you discover everything about the Almighty? If only you knew what he thinks of you. If only you would prepare your heart and stretch out your hands to him. Zophar was saying Job's punishment was less than he deserved. See, don't let religious people convince you that you're being punished for sins you didn't commit. Zophar was sure Job was guilty, but God said Job was blameless. Sometimes the most religious-sounding people give the worst counsel. Only God knows your heart. Stand in your integrity. Know God for yourself. Chapter 12. Mr. Job has had enough of his friends' accusations. He defends himself strongly and tells them about how faith and God work. Job's response to Zophar is filled with sarcasm toward his friends and deep statements about God. Mr. Job replied, "Zophar, the first thing Job said was, You people know everything, don't you? He then told them that when they die, wisdom will die with them. Job told Zophar that he knows that he's better than they are. He said he's just a blameless man, but his friends laughed at him. He told them to go ask the animals and birds to teach them, and to tell them that the birds, animals, and earth know that his disaster came from God's hands. He said the ear tests the words it hears, and the mouth distinguishes between foods. Mr. Job said one of the most powerful statements in the Bible. He said, "Even though he kills me, I will still hope in him." Job declared that even if God killed him, he would still trust God. Chapter 12 taught us something very important. We should trust God even when we don't see what we are looking for, even when we don't get answers to our requests, which is what real faith means. You have to trust God, not because you understand his ways, but because you know what he can do. That's the faith God is looking for. Look at what Job said. Even though he kills me, I will still trust in him. This is the greatest statement of faith. Not I'll trust God if he gives me what I want, but trust God all the time. Some people are weak. If they don't get what they want like this, they will lose hope, which is not supposed to be so. Give him time, let him do his work, is just a test to know whether you can stay with him in both good and bad times. Don't give up on God yet, because he will never give up on you. In chapter 13, Job continues defending himself and expressing his desire to argue his case directly before God. Mr. Job maintains his innocence, and he kept telling his friends that he's innocent, but they refused to listen. He was left with no choice but to rebuke his friends for their false comfort. In this chapter 13, Mr. Job called his friends worthless physicians. He said it this way: "I know as much as you do. You are no better than I am. As for me, I will argue my case with God Almighty himself. And as for you, you try to tarnish my name with lies. As physicians that you are worthless quacks." Mr. Job then told his friends to let him speak, and they should be quiet and listen to his charge. They should pay attention to his argument that that's the wisest thing they can do for him right now. That worthless quack is very loud. Mr. Job has a bad mouth. Mr. Job accused his friends of being false witnesses who claimed to speak for God, but actually misrepresented him. See, let me tell you something. Stand in your integrity, even when everyone says you're wrong. This is funny to me. Even in pain and sickness, Mr. Job was busy insulting his friends left and right. You can imagine him calling his friends quacks. Job's 3 friends all told him he was guilty, but Job knew his heart, and God knew his heart. Job stood his ground. Don't let peer pressure or popular opinion make you compromise your integrity. If you're walking right before God, stand in that, even if you stand alone. Now, I'm not saying when someone tries to correct you, you shouldn't listen. That's a different case. In chapter 14, Job demonstrates how short and difficult human life is. He voiced his desire for relief and hope beyond this life. He said life is short and full of trouble. Mr. Job said life is like a passing shadow that quickly disappears. Job said God already measures man's days on earth. He also said God has decided the length of our lives, and he knows how many months we will live. Job contemplates mortality and the apparent end of life. Job continues telling God to let us rest. He was telling God here that we are like hired hands, that God should let us finish our work in peace. He also said that even though a tree has more hope than we humans, if it is cut down, it will sprout again and grow new branches. Though its roots have grown old in the earth and stumps its decay at the scent of water, it will bud and sprout again like a new seedling. But when people die, their strength and hope are gone. He said when people are laid to rest, they do not rise again until the heavens are no more. They will not wake up or be aroused from their sleep. Job was basically saying, since we are God's workers and we are left with a short time to finish the work he gave us, he should let us enjoy our work and finish it in peace. Mr. Job then asked this question. He said, "Can the dead live again? If so, he will be glad because it will give him hope through all the years of his struggle, and he will eagerly await the release of death, and all the days of his hard service he will wait for his renewal to come." He also told God, "You will call and I will answer you. You will long for the creature your hands have made." Job expressed a small sign of hope that death might not be the end. Life is short and much of it is hard. Job understood this truth deeply, but even in his darkest moment, he held onto a thread of hope that there might be something beyond death. That hope was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, who conquered death and proved that the grave is not the end. When life feels overpowering, remember, this is not all. In chapter 15, Eliphaz speaks for the second time, becoming more aggressive in accusing Job of wickedness. He said to Job that he is nothing but a windbag. As Job was busy insulting his friends, they were insulting him back. At some point, when I was reading it, I was like, who will win this insult? Let's see. So, Eliphaz's second speech is harsher than his first speech, showing frustration that Job won't confess his sin. Eliphaz said to Mr. Job that a wise man wouldn't answer with such empty talk. He said to Job that the wise don't engage in empty chatter. He said to Job that Mr. Job has no fear of God, that Job has no reverence for him, that his sins are telling him what to say. He then told Job that his words are based on clever deception. He said Job's mouth condemns him, not him, Eliphaz. Eliphaz kept on bashing Mr. Job, telling if he was the first person to be born, or did he have a degree in wisdom that made him feel and think he knows it all. Eliphaz kept on asking Job, what does he know that they don't know, that he should listen to him and he will show Job from his experience? I feel Job's friends should have stayed silent as they were right from the first day, because they were literally adding to his wound. Eliphaz described in detail how the wicked suffer. They live in terror. Darkness overtakes them and distress fills them. Eliphaz was implying that since Job suffered, Job must be wicked. But Eliphaz was wrong. Your friend's wrong theology can add to your pain if you're not careful. Eliphaz kept hammering the same false message. Suffering equals sin. Don't take in other people's wrong beliefs about God. Just because someone is religious or quotes scripture doesn't mean they're right. Test everything against the full counsel of God's word. Even Jesus said, test every spirit and know which one is true. Just be careful. In chapter 16, Mr. Job called Eliphaz a miserable comforter. He told him he had heard all of these before, that what makes Eliphaz keeps talking. He asked him if he won't stop blowing hot air. Mr. Job said that if Eliphaz were in his shoes, he, Job, could have spouted off criticism and shaken his head. But if it were to be him, Job, he would have comforted Eliphaz and tried to take away his grief, but instead Job suffers no less if he refuses to speak. Job was basically telling Eliphaz that if it were him, he would comfort them, bring out their grief, and make sure they are okay. But what did he get in return from them? They added to his wound. I'm sure some of us have friends like this. They won't have anything to offer, but they will want to take from you. And when you need them to be with you in terms of need, they will judge you, criticize you, and condemn you. Mr. Job felt betrayed. Job felt attacked on all sides, which made him say a word like God has grounded him down and devastated his family, that God presented him to people as if he had sinned. God reduced him to skin and bone. God has tear him apart and made people laugh at him, that God has handed him over to sinners, that God turned him over to evil men and thrown him into the clutches of the wicked. He continues saying, all was well with him before, but God has shattered him. Men opened their mouths to jeer at him. Mr. Job was sad here. When you're suffering, you don't need people to lecture you. You just need people to love you. Job's friends were miserable comforters because they made his pain worse. They added to what was wrong with him, not helping him get better. If you want to help someone in pain, listen more than you talk. Be present. Don't try to explain everything. Just be there. Let the person recover. Keep consoling the person and do not judge them, please. In chapter 17, Mr. Job continued to defend his innocence. Job said his spirit is crushed and his life is nearly snuffed out. He said the grave was ready to receive him, that he was surrounded by mockers. Mr. Job feels his life is coming to an end and sees no relief. Job cried to God to defend him since nobody wants to listen to him, that God has closed their mind of understanding, that God should not let them win. He said his friends betrayed him for their own advantage, and Job then lay curse on their children. Most of us suffer curses from our lineage that we know nothing about. You can imagine the innocent children who received curses on behalf of their father. Mr. Job continues crying to God, saying, "If the only home I hope for is the grave, if I spread out my bed in darkness, if I say to corruption, 'You are my father,' and to the worm, 'My mother or my sister,' where then is my hope? Who can see any hope for me? Sometimes hope fades and sorrow feels crushing." Job reached a point where he could see no way out, no relief, no future. If you're in that place right now, know this. Your feelings are valid, but they're not the full truth. What you can't and do not see doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes hope returns, not because circumstances change, but because God gives you strength to endure it one more day. In chapter 18, Bildad speaks for the second time, continuing to insist that Job's suffering proves wickedness. Bildad's speech is a detailed description of how the wicked are punished, saying Mr. Job is wicked. Bildad asked Job how long before he stopped talking. Bildad told him to speak sense if he wants them to hear that. Does Mr. Job think they are mere animals? He asked him if he thinks they are stupid, that if he likes, he should tear his hair in anger, that it won't destroy the earth, and it won't make the rock tremble. Bildad described the fate of the wicked, saying, "The lamp of the wicked is snuffed out. The light in their tent becomes dark, their vigorous stride is shortened, and terrors startle them on every side. Calamity is hungry for them, disaster is ready for them, and disease is ready to eat away their skin, death devour their limbs. They are torn from the security of their tent. Look, don't let people use your suffering as proof that you're a bad person." Bildad looked at Job's situation and said, "See, this is what happens to wicked people, so you must be wicked." But that logic is imperfect. Good people suffer too. Jesus suffered more than anyone, and he was perfect. Your pain is not proof of guilt. In chapter 19, Job replied to Bildad, asking him how long he would continue to torture him. How long would he continue to crush him with his words? Job said to Bildad that Bildad and the others have already insulted him 10 times, that, "Are you not ashamed of treating me badly?" Job told them that even if he had sinned, that's his own concern and not theirs. Job said to them that they think they are better than him, using his predicament as evidence of his sin. Job was begging his friends to have mercy on him, that if God punished him, would they have to add their own? In the midst of suffering, Job makes one of the most powerful declarations of faith in the entire Bible. Despite feeling attacked by everyone, Job declares his hope in God. Then Job made his powerful declaration saying, "But I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my body I will see God. I will see him for myself. Yes, I will see him with my own eyes. I am overwhelmed at the thought." This is one of the clearest Old Testament prophecies of resurrection and the Messiah, and Job made the declaration. See, when you can't see the way out, declare what you know about God. Job didn't say, "I feel like," or "I hope," and he said, "I know." That's faith. When your feelings are a mess and circumstances are terrible, stand on what you know to be true about God. Your Redeemer lives. He conquered death, and one day you will see him. In chapter 20, Zophar speaks again, replying to Mr. Job. Zophar said he must reply because he's disturbed that he has endured the insult Job has insulted him. And if he doesn't say it out, he won't be happy. Zophar, continuing the theme that wicked people don't prosper long. He said to Job that, "Don't you realize that from the beginning of the earth, ever since people were first placed on the earth, the mastery of the wicked has been short-lived, and the joy of the godless has been only temporary? Though his pride reaches to the heavens and his head touches the clouds, he will perish forever. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? Zophar continued saying, he will spit out the riches he swallowed. God will make his stomach vomit them up. The wealth he hoarded will not endure. In the midst of his plenty, distress will overtake him. The full force of misery will come upon him. See, this chapter 20 in summary tells us not to judge someone's relationship with God based on current circumstances. Zophar assumed suffering is equal to wickedness and prosperity equals righteousness. But the Bible contradicts this. Joseph was righteous and he ended up in prison. David was anointed king and he spent years running for his life. Jesus was perfect and he was crucified. Circumstances or situations don't tell the full story. Job challenges his friends' simplistic theology by pointing out that wicked people often do prosper in life. Job then told his friends to listen to him, that that's the only consolation they can give to him, that they should bear with him, and after he is done talking, they can resume mocking him. Job made them understand that wicked people do prosper, and God doesn't punish them. He then explains to them how the wicked live, and how their children live as well. He tells them how the wicked despise God, and how they don't pray and worship God, and how the light of the wicked never seems to be extinguished, and how he thinks about whether they do face trouble. He made it clear to his friends that evil people do live long, they don't face any trouble, and in times of calamity, they are left out and they escape disaster. To cut it short, because he went on to explain to them, I will say this, don't expect life to always be fair in the moment. Sometimes wicked people prosper and righteous people suffer. That doesn't mean God isn't real or just doesn't want to punish the wicked. No, it means we live in a broken world where sin has consequences and not everything makes sense yet. But God sees everything and one day he will make all things right. Trust his justice even when you can't see it. In chapter 22, Eliphaz replied the third time again with specific false accusations against Job. Eliphaz then asked, can a person do anything to help God? Can even a wise person be helpful to him? He continues saying that, is it to any advantage to the Almighty if you are righteous? Will it be a gain to him if you are perfect? Is it because you are so faithful that he accuses? No, it is because of your wickedness. There's no limit to your sins. He went on, even giving examples. Then Eliphaz made specific false accusations, saying, you demanded security from your brothers for no reason. You stripped men of their clothing. You gave no water to the weary and withheld food from the hungry. And none of this was true. God himself said Job was blameless. See, people will sometimes make up reasons to explain yourself and suffering because they're uncomfortable not knowing. Eliphaz couldn't accept that Job was innocent and suffering, so he invented sins. Be careful about doing this to others, and be careful when others do it to you. Sometimes there is no explanation, because the more you explain, the more they judge you and nail you. Sometimes you just have to trust God in the mystery. In chapter 23, Mr. Job's 8th speech, a response to Eliphaz. And Mr. Job said his complaint is still better that he's trying not to groan aloud. If only he knew where he can find God, and he would go to his court and present his case to God and argue with him. Also, he would listen to God reply and understand what he says, and asked if God would use his great power to answer him. He replied himself saying no, that God will give him fair hearing. He then said, honest people can reason with him. Job expresses his desperate desire to present his case directly to God and hear God's answers. Job believes that if he could just talk to God face to face, God would vindicate him. After Mr. Job was done talking about going to the west, east, south, and north, that he will not see God there, he said something in verse 10 of this chapter 23. He said, but he knows where I am going, and when he tests me, I will come out as pure as gold. Did you hear that? What he was saying here simply means he believed his trial was refining him, just like gold is refined in fire. This chapter 23 tells us that trials are not meant to destroy us, but to refine us. Gold is purified by fire. Heat burns away impurities. And what's left is pure gold. Your trials do the same thing. God is burning away what's not of him. So what is remaining is pure, strong, and valuable. Just trust the refining process, even when it hurts. I know it's not easy, but just keep trusting God, I beg you. It was in my trial that I believed God tests people during a hard time. In chapter 24, Mr. Job questions why God seems to allow injustice to go unpunished. Job wrestles with why God allows evil people to oppress the innocent and get away with it easily. He asked why God doesn't bring the wicked to judgment, that evil people steal land up and down, steal livestock, and put them in their own pasture. They demand a widow's ox as security for a loan. They take orphans' donkeys. The poor must suffer before they find food, searching even in the desert for their children, and they glean in the vineyard of the wicked. Job then said, "Yet God charges no one with wrongdoing. Though these men rebel against God, though they do not know his ways or stay in his paths, they are foam on the surface of the water." Job was wrestling with why God seems to let wickedness go unpunished in the moment. Why does God allow injustice? This is one of the oldest questions humanity asks. Even me, I do ask this question, but I realize that wicked people are oppressing the vulnerable and they are getting away with it easily. The answer is complex. We cannot question God. God does see, he does care, but he operates on a timeline we don't control and can't understand. His justice will come, maybe not today, maybe not in this life, but it will surely come. I want you to know that God sees every injustice and he will make all things right. It might not be in your timing, but he will surely make things right. Chapter 25 is one of Bildad's shortest replies in this book of Job to Mr. Job himself. Bildad said dominion belongs to God. He establishes order in the heights of heaven. Can his forces be numbered? Bildad said, can God light shine in all the earth? How then can a man be righteous before God? How can one born of a woman be pure? I don't know where Mr. Bildad is from. Is only Mr. Bildad that doesn't know that God's light shines all over the earth? No wonder Mr. Job asked him what spirit was speaking through him in chapter 26. Bildad continues saying, if even the moon is not bright and the stars are not pure in his eyes, how much less man, who is but a maggot, a son of man, who is only a worm? Mr. Bildad, is it well with you here? Bildad's point was that no human is righteous before God, so Job should stop claiming innocence. But Bildad missed the point. Yes, no human is perfect, but Job wasn't claiming to be perfect. He was claiming he hadn't done anything to deserve this level of suffering. There's a huge difference between being imperfect and being guilty of wickedness. Chapter 26. Mr. Job replied to Bildad, asking him, how has Bildad helped the powerless and the weak? What advice have you offered to one without wisdom? And what great insight you have displayed? Where have you gotten this wise saying? What spirit speaks through you? Mr. Job describes how powerful God is from verses 6 to 14 of this chapter. In summary, what he describes here is that he said God is extremely powerful. He controls the sky, the earth, the sea, the clouds, mountains, and what we see is only a small part of his greatness. Even all the visible power that we see God has is just the tip of an iceberg compared to his full glory. What we can see and understand about God is the outer fringe of his works. If the universe, the stars, the mountains, the oceans are just the edge of God's power, imagine his full glory. This should humble us and give us peace. The God who runs the universe is running your life too, and he's so powerful. In chapter 27, Mr. Job stands firm in his innocence despite all the pressure to confess sins he didn't commit. Job vowed in chapter 27 not to ever speak evil, and his tongue will not tell lies. Job then said, I will never admit you are in the right. Till I die, I will not deny my integrity, no matter what. Listen to me. Do not let people compromise your integrity. Mr. Job's lifetime tells us a lot. No matter the negative things people say about you, do not let it get to you, because the moment you inhale those negative things into your life, you will start seeing yourself less and look at yourself as if you are nothing. Stand on yourself, believe in yourself, know yourself for who you are and not what people say about you. In chapter 28, Mr. Job speaks about wisdom and understanding, and he said, people know where to mine silver and how to refine gold. They know where to dig iron from the earth and how to smelt copper from rock. They know how to shine light in the darkness and explore the farthest regions of the earth. Mr. Job said again, where does understanding come from? It cannot be from the finest of gold or be from the price weighed in silver. It cannot be bought with precious onyx or sapphires. Neither gold nor crystal can compare with it. Mr. Job later concluded that God is the only one who has understanding and know where it comes from. He also said God is the only one that understands the ways of wisdom. And God said to man that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and to forsake evil is real understanding. A lesson from chapter 28 is that wisdom comes from knowing God and walking in reverence of Him. If you want to make wise decisions, start by seeking God first. Everything else will fall into place. In chapter 29, Mr. Job speaks about his former blessings. Mr. Job's case has now turned to someone who once had money. And you know, anyone who once had money will always refer to their past wealth. This happened to Mr. Job. Here, Mr. Job talks about how he missed those years when he had money, how God took care of him, how he used to walk safely through the dark when he was still in his prime, and all he kept talking of his past wealth. Chapter 29 taught us that Job's reflection reminds us that life changes, often dramatically. Yesterday's blessings can become today's memories. But our identity is not found in our circumstances. It's found in God. Job had been respected and prosperous, but those things didn't define him. What defined him was his character and his relationship with God. Those remained even when everything else was gone. Chapter 30, Mr. Job speaks of his anguish. Mr. Job now said he is mocked by people who are younger than him, by young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with his sheepdogs, and he has become a byword among them. They now detest him and keep their distance. They do not care to spit in his face. Job described his suffering. He talks about how depression haunts his days, and at night his bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at him relentlessly. He said, God has thrown him to the mud, and he's nothing more than dust and ashes. See, sometimes the pain of public humiliation and loss of respect hurts as much as physical pain. Job went from being honored to being mocked, from being respected to being spat on. And this is one of the worst things that can happen to somebody. People who respected you before now see you as a rag. It's always painful. That's the pain Mr. Job was saying and feeling here. If you've experienced this kind of fall from grace, know that your worth is not determined by public opinion. God sees you. God values you. And one day he will vindicate you. And those who laugh at you before will still come back and rejoice with you. Chapter 31 is about Mr. Job's final protest of his innocence. He listed all the sins he did not commit, essentially saying, if he's guilty of these sins, let him be punished. He said not to have fornicated or had lust for women. He had not lied before. He had not deceived anyone before. He then said, if he had done any other sins that he didn't know, let another person eat the crops he planted, and all that he had planted be uprooted. Mr. Job went on and on. He kept talking. He kept defending his innocence. He then said if only someone could listen to him, he will sign his name to his defense and let God answer him. And he will face his accusation proudly. He will wear his accusation like crown, and he tell God exactly what he has done. Mr. Job, just be calming down here. Why wear your accusations like crown? is, well, Job wanted God to either vindicate him or explain why this was happening. In chapter 31, Job's defense shows us the importance of living with integrity. He could list all these things he didn't do because he had genuinely tried to live right. Listen, your conscience matters. Even when no one is watching, even when you could get away with it, live with integrity. One day you'll need to stand on that foundation and you'll be glad it's solid. Remember, Jesus said on that last day, it will be just you and your Creator. Will you be able to defend your integrity on that day? Let your foundation be solid, even when no one is watching. Chapter 32, someone else replied, Job's friend, and that person is Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite. Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, became very angry with Job because he refused to admit that he had sinned against God and that God was right in punishing him. He was also angry with Mr. Job's 3 friends for making God to appear to be wrong by their inability to answer Mr. Job arguments. Elihu had waited for others to speak to Job because he was younger, and in their tradition, when an elder is talking, the young ones don't talk. But when he saw that they had no further reply, he spoke out angrily. Elihu said, I am young and you are old. That is why I held back from telling you what I know. But sometimes the elders are not wise. The age doesn't understand justice. Elihu went on and on. He kept talking, but the summary of what he was saying in chapter 32 is that Elihu represents a different perspective. He sees that both Job and his friends are partially wrong. He's angry at Job for justifying himself rather than God, but also angry at his friends for condemning Job without proof. In chapter 33, Elihu presents his case against Mr. Job. Elihu argues that God does speak to people, including through suffering, to keep them from sin. Even said Job should pay attention to him since he's now talking, that he speaks the truth. Elihu argued with Job saying, for God does speak, God speaks again and again. He speaks through visions of the night and through dreams. So why are you bringing charges against him? Why say he does not respond to people's complaints, though man may not perceive it? In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, or on beds of affliction, a man is chastened with pain. God speaks through suffering to turn man from wrongdoing and keep him from pride. So, in a nutshell of what is saying, because he kept on talking, what Mr. Elihu is saying is that sometimes God does use suffering to teach us, to redirect us, or keep us from pride. Not all suffering is punishment, but sometimes it is correction or preparation. So if you're going through trials and a hard time, this is what I want you to put into practice. The key is asking God, what are you teaching me through this? Rather than just asking God, why is this happening? One question leads to growth, the other often leads to bitterness. Ask the one that leads to growth and forget the one that leads to bitterness. Now, chapter 34. Here, Mr. Elihu accuses Mr. Job of arrogance. Elihu argues that God is always just and never does wrong, even when we don't understand his ways. Elihu said, God is perfectly just. If something happens, it is not because God is evil or unfair. Elihu then said, Mr. Job doesn't know what he is talking about. He is speaking wrongly about God. His suffering should continue until he learns his lesson. So in chapter 34, Elihu was right. Elihu is partially right. God is just and does not do wrong. But he's also partially wrong in suggesting Job was adding sin to his suffering. This shows that even when people make good points about God's character, they can still misapply those truths to your situation. Discernment is needed. In chapter 35, Elihu reminds Mr. Job of God's justice. Elihu then said, do you think it is right for you to claim, I am righteous before God? Yet you ask him, what profit is it to me, and what do I gain by not sinning? If you sin, how does that affect him? If your sins are many, what does that do to him? If you are righteous, what do you give to him? Elihu then continued talking, saying, Job is talking nonsense, and he's talking like a fool, and God is not impressed by human righteousness nor wounded by human sin. He is sovereign and complete in himself. Chapter 35 is saying this is both humbling and releasing. We can't impress God with our righteousness. He's already perfect and complete. We can't harm him with our sin. He's sovereign. But our choices do affect other people and ourselves. We live righteously not to earn God's favor. We already have it through Jesus, but because it's the right way to live and it blesses those around us. Chapter 36, Elihu still continues speaking, saying he's not done defending God and he will present the greatest argument for the righteousness of God. Elihu continues by describing God's power, wisdom, and control over creation. He continues saying those who suffers, God deliver them. He shows them the reason. He shows them their sins of pride and commands that they turn their way from evil. And if they listen and obey God, they will be blessed with prosperity throughout their lives. Elihu's theology is better than the three friends. He understands that suffering can be instructive, not just punitive. Sometimes God allows difficulty to get our attention, redirect our path, or prepare us for something greater. The question isn't always, what did I do wrong? But instead, what is God teaching me through this hard time? In chapter 37, Elihu concludes his speech with a surprising speech that inspired descriptions of God's power over nature. Elihu described God's control, saying his heart pounds as he thinks about it, and it trembles within him. He then told them to listen. He said, listen to the roar of his voice. He unleashes his lightning. God's voice thunders in marvelous ways. He does great things beyond our understanding. He says to the snow, fall on the earth, and to the rain to pour down, and everybody stops working just to watch his mighty power. Mr. Elihu said a lot. Mr. Man kept talking. Part of what he said and what he concluded was the Almighty is beyond our reach and exalted in power. In his justice and great righteousness, he does not oppress. Therefore, men revere him, for does he not have regard for all the wise in heart? Elihu's words set the stage for God's appearance. Mr. Elihu made the longest response among those who are responding to Mr. Job. Here is my take in this chapter. Elihu's speech serves an important purpose. It made us understand that it reminds everyone of God's greatness and prepares them for God to speak. Sometimes we need to be reminded of who we're dealing with before God addresses our specific situation. God is not just a problem solver. He is the sovereign creator of the universe. Chapter 38. The chapter I've been waiting for because this is where God replied Mr. Job. In this chapter, the Lord challenged Job. Instead of God to answer Mr. Job's questions, God was the one who asked Job questions. He asked Job that who does Job thinks he is that made him question his authority. This is how God said it. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? God then told him to brace himself up like a man. Chai, see my God, look at the lines God used here. Brace yourself like a man. God asked Job, where was he when he was laying the foundation of the earth? He said Job should tell him since he knows too much. God questioned Mr. Job in this chapter 38. Big time, no cap. God said, who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footing set, or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together when the angels shout for joy? Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Just to sum it up because of time. Chapter 38 is all about God's response to Job and goes this way. God's response to Job is that you don't even understand how the physical world works. How can you understand my ways? This sounds harsh, but it's actually needed and freeing. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to figure out why God allowed this or that. Your job is to trust him even when you don't understand. God is infinitely wise, infinitely powerful, and infinitely good. And God continued to reply Mr. Job in chapter 39 saying, do you know when the wild goats give birth? Have you watched how a deer gives birth in the bush? God continued, Who let the wild donkey go free? Does the wild donkey bray when it has grass? Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Can you bind him to the furrow with a harness? God asked, does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread his wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build his nest on high? God finished Mr. Job with heavy questions that Job had no answers. See, in this chapter, God's questions aren't meant to humiliate Job, but to give him perspective. If Job can't control or even understand the animals God created, how can he then understand God's purposes for human suffering? See, this is about trusting that the God who cares for every creature also cares for you and I and has purposes we can't see yet. In chapter 40, God challenges Job to admit he cannot run the universe better than God does. God asked Job if he wants to continue arguing with God that Job is God critic, and he asked if Job had an answer. Mr. Job had no answer. Job said, I am nothing. I do not have an answer. I will cover my mouth with my hand. I have said too much already. I have nothing to say. The Lord challenged Mr. Job again. This time the Lord answered Job from a whirlwind, telling him to brace himself up again, that he had some questions for him. The Lord asked him again if he will discredit God just to prove that Job is right. God asked Job if Job is as strong as God and if he can speak or talk with a voice of thunder like him. God then described Behemoth, possibly a dinosaur or hippopotamus. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins. What power in the muscles of his belly. He ranks first among the works of God. Can anyone capture him? In this chapter 40, what God described about Behemoth was that if you can't even control this creature that God made, how can you run the universe? It's a call to surrender control. Stop demanding explanations. Just trust that the God who created Behemoth is running your life too. In chapter 41, God describes another creature. God describes Leviathan, a terrifying sea creature that no human can control. God said, can you hold Leviathan, a creature that has a hook, or put a noose around its jaw? God continues to challenge Mr. Job. God said, can you tie Leviathan with a rope through the nose or pierce its jaw with a spike? God then described Leviathan's power. His snorting throws out flashes of light. His eyes are like the rays of dawn. Firebrands stream from his mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Strength resides in his neck. Dismay goes before him. Nothing on earth is his equal. A creature without fear. He looks down on all who are haughty. He is king over all who are proud. Leviathan represents forces we cannot control. Chaos, danger, the unknown. God's point, if you can't tame Leviathan, trust the God who can. Your life may feel chaotic and out of control. Chapter 42, the last chapter before we talk about the life lesson we learn from the story of Mr. Job. Mr. Job responds to God. God rebukes Job's friends, and God restores Job with double what he lost. Job said to God, I know that you can do all things and no one can stop you. You asked, who is this that asks questions with ignorance? It is I who ask questions of what I know nothing about. In verse 7 of this chapter, God refuses Job's friends. He was not happy about what Eliphaz, Zophar, Bildad did, and God instructs the three of them to take 7 bull and 7 ram and go to his servant Job and offer burnt offering for themselves. Job will then pray on their behalf, and God will accept it for them. God said the 3 of them didn't speak accurately about him. That's why he's angry about them. When Job prayed for his friends, the Lord heard him and returned everything the devil took from him. In fact, God didn't just return what Lucifer took alone, but twice what he lost. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord made him prosperous again and gave him twice as much as he had before. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. God also gave him back another 7 sons and 3 daughters. Nowhere in all the land, like no woman, was as much as beautiful as Job's daughters. Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so he died old and full of years. See, when God restores what the enemy stole, he doesn't just restore that alone. He makes it double. Is a God of wonder, the miracle worker, the destiny changer, the untouchable, the unshakable, the everlasting God, the I am that I am, the King of Kings, the first and the last, the ever true God. God is too much. If you're with me, let me hear you in the comment section. See, when God is silent in your case, it doesn't mean he's not working or he didn't hear you, but God is faithful. He sees what you've lost. He knows what you've suffered. He will restore you. Maybe not in this life, but definitely in eternity. Notice Job's restoration came after he prayed for his friends who hurt him. Forgiveness unlocks blessing. We are done studying the entire 42 chapters of Job. Now let's talk about the life lesson from his story. 1, God trusts you with suffering. God allowed Job to suffer not because Job was weak, but because Job was strong. God bragged about Job. Sometimes God allows fire not because you did wrong, but because he trusts you to come out as gold. Your trial is not punishment, it is training. 2, you don't know what happens behind the scenes. Mr. Job never knew about heaven's conversation. He never knew why. He died not knowing the full story. And that's okay. You won't always know why God allows what he allows. Your job is not to understand everything. Your job is to trust God anyway. 3, not all suffering is punishment. Mr. Job's friends were convinced that Job must have sinned. They were wrong. God said Job was blameless. Sometimes good people suffer. Jesus suffered more than anyone, and he was perfect. Don't let anyone tell you your pain is proof of guilt. Be honest with God. Mr. Job cursed the day he was born, wished never existed, questioned God, expressed pain raw, and God did not rebuke him for it. God rebuked friends who defended God with false theology. God can handle your honesty. He'd rather have real prayers than fake smiles. 5, bad advice makes pain worse. Mr. Job's friends came to comfort but made everything worse. They accused, judged, and told him confess sins he didn't commit. When someone suffers, don't lecture. Don't try to explain everything. Just be there. Sit with them. Love them. That's what they need most. 6, God is God and you are not. When God spoke, he didn't answer Job's questions. Instead, he asked Job questions. Where were you when I laid foundations? Can you command morning? God reminded Job that there's infinite gap between creator and created. You don't have to understand everything God does. Just trust he's wise, powerful, good. 7, worship is a choice, not a feeling. Mr. Job worshipped God when he had nothing. Said, Lord gave, Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Did not feel like worshipping, but chose to worship. Faith is not proven when everything is good. Faith is proven when everything falls apart and you worship anyway. 8, God restores, often double. Mr. Job ended with twice what he started with. God gave back double. This doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes restoration is in eternity, not on earth, but God sees what you lost. He knows what you sacrificed. He will restore you. Maybe not your timeline, but his timeline, which is always perfect. 9, forgiveness unlocks blessing. Job's restoration came after he prayed for friends who wounded him deeply, could have held bitterness, could have refused forgive, but he prayed for them. And then God restored him. Forgiveness is not just for the other person. It's for you. It unlocks your future. 10, the end is not the end. Job lived 140 more years after restoration, saw children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, died old and full. His worst season was not the final season. Whatever you're going through right now is not the end of your story, is a chapter yet to be written. God is not done with you. All right, people, we are done with the whole Bible chapters and life lessons from Mr. Job. This is inspired by Nessa. This channel is home. If you are looking for where to grow your faith, listen to spiritual messages, daily prophetic prayers, and motivations. You will love everything here. Please give us a like and share this video. We love you. Bye.